Alright, y'all, chapter 60. An unprivileged nation. The island, seen from the air, was an amazingly regular rectangle. Seen from the air was an amazingly regular rectangle. I'm just starting to read, so. Cruel and useless stone needles were thrust up from the sea. They sketched a circle around it. At the south end of the island was the port city of Bolivar. It was the only city, was the capital. It was built on a marshy table. The runways of Manzano Airport were on its waterfront. Mountains rose abruptly to the north of Bolivar, crowding the remainder of the island with their brutal humps. They were called the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, but they looked like pigs at a trough to me. Bolivar had many names: Casma, Santa Maria, St. Louis, St. George, and Port Gloria among them. It was given its present name by Johnson and McCabe in 1922. It was named in honor of Simón Bolívar, the great Latin American idealist and hero. When Johnson and McCabe came upon the city, it was built of twigs, tin crates, and mud, rested on the catacombs of a trillion happy scavengers, catacombs in a sour mash of slop, feculence, and slime. That was pretty much the way I found it, too, except for the new architectural false face along the waterfront. That's how it was pretty much the way I found it, too, except for the new architectural false face along the waterfront. Johnson and McCabe had failed to raise the people from misery and muck. Papa Manzano had failed, too. Everybody was bound to fail, for San Lorenzo was as unproductive as an equal area in the Sahara or the polar ice cap. At the same time, it had as dense a population as could be found anywhere, India and China not excluded. There were 450 inhabitants of each uninhabitable square mile. During the idealistic phase of McCabe's and Johnson's reorganization of San Lorenzo, it was announced that the country's total income would be divided among all adult persons in equal shares, wrote Philip Castle. The first and only time this was tried, each share came to between $6 and $7. 61. What a corporal was worth. In the customs shed at Manzano Airport, we were all required to submit to a luggage inspection and to convert what money we intended to spend in San Lorenzo into the local currency, into corporals, which Papa Manzano insisted were worth 50 American cents. The shed was neat and new, but plenty of signs had already been slapped on the walls. Pigletty. Anybody caught practicing Bacanism in San Lorenzo, said one, will die on the hook. Another poster featured a picture of Bacanan, a scrawny, old colored man who was smoking a cigar. He looked clever and kind and amused. Under the picture were the words, wanted dead or alive, 10,000 corporals reward. I took a closer look at that poster and found reproduced at the bottom of it some sort of police identification form Bacanin had to fill out way back in 1929. It was reproduced apparently to show Bacanin hunters what his fingerprints and handwriting were like. But what interested me were some of the words Bakunin had chosen to put into the blanks in 1929. Wherever possible, we had taken the cosmic view, had taken into consideration, for instance, such things as the shortness of life and the longness of eternity. He reported his avocation as being alive. He reported his principal occupation as being dead. This is a Christian nation. All foot play will be punished by the hook, said another sign. The sign was meaningless to me, since I had not yet learned that Bacchanists mingled their souls by pressing the bottoms of their feet together. And the greatest mystery of all, since I had not read all of Philip Castle's book, was how Bacanin, bosom friend of Corporal McCabe, had come to be an outlaw. 62. Why Hazel wasn't scared. Was how Bacanin, bosom friend of Corporal McCabe. 62. Why Hazel wasn't scared. There were 7 of us who got off at San Lorenzo. Newt, Angela, Ambassador Minton and his wife, H. Lowe Crosby and his wife, and I. When we had cleared customs, we were herded outdoors onto a viewing stand. There we faced a very quiet crowd. 5,000 or more San Lorenzans stared at us. The islanders were oatmeal colored. The people were thin. There wasn't a fat person to be seen. Every person had teeth missing. Many legs were bowed or swollen. Bowed or swollen. Not one pair of eyes was clear. The women's breasts were bare and paltry. The men were loose, loinclothes that did little to conceal penis, benes like pendulums on grandfather clocks. There were many dogs, but not one barked. There were many infants, but not one cried. Here and there someone coughed, and that was all. A military band stood at attention before the crowd. It did not play. There was a color guard before the band. It carried two banners, the stars and stripes and the flag of San Lorenzo. The flag of San Lorenzo consisted of a Marine corporal's chevrons on a royal blue field. The banners hung lank in the wind as day. I imagined that somewhere far away I heard the blaming of a sledge on a brazen drum. There was no such sound. My soul was simply resonating in the beat of the brassy, clanging heat of the San Lorenzo climb. I'm sure glad it's a Christian country, Hazel Crosby whispered to her husband, or I'd be a little scared. Behind us was a xylophone. There was a glittering sign on the xylophone. The sign was made of garnets and rhinestones. The sign said Mona, 63, reverent and free. To the left side of our reviewing stand were 6 propeller-driven fighter planes in a row. To the left side of our reviewing stand, there were propeller-driven fighter planes in a row, military assistance from the United States to San Lorenzo. On the fuselage of each plane was painted, with childish bloodlust, a boa constrictor which was crushing the devil to death. Blood came from the devil's ears, nose, and mouth. A pitchfork was slipping from satanic red fingers. Before each plane stood an oatmeal-colored pilot, silent too. Then above the tumid silence, there came a nagging song like the song of a gnat. It was a siren approaching. The siren was on Papa's glossy black Cadillac limousine. The siren was on Papa's glossy black Cadillac limousine. The limousine came to a stop before us, tires smoking. Out climbed Papa Manzano, his adopted daughter Mona Amons Manzano, and Franklin Honecker. At a limp, imperious signal from Papa, the crowd sang the San Lorenzo national anthem. Its melody was Home on the Range. The words had been written in 1922 by Lionel Boyd Johnson by Buchanan. The words were these: Oh, ours is a land where the living is grand. Oh, ours is a land where the living is grand. And the men are fearless as sharks. The women are pure, and we always are sure that our children will all toe their marks. San Lorenzo, what a rich, lucky island we are. Our enemies quail, for they know they will fail against people so reverent and free. People so reverent and free. 64, peace and plenty. And then the crowd was deathly still again. Papa and Mona and Frank joined us on the reviewing stand. Our snare drum played as they did so. The drumming stopped when Papa joined a finger at the drummer. He wore a shoulder holster on the outside of his blouse. The weapon in it was a chromium-plated .45. He was an old man, as so many members of my karate were. He was in poor shape. His steps were small and bounceless. He was still a fat man, but his lard was melting fast, for his simple uniform was loose. The balls of his hop-toed eyes were yellow. His hands trembled. His personal bodyguard was a Major General Franklin Honecker, whose uniform was white. Frank, thin-wristed, narrow-shouldered, looked like a child kept up long after his customary bedtime. On his breast was a medal. I observed the two, Papa and Frank, with some difficulty, not because my view was blocked, but because I could not take my eyes off Mona. I was thrilled, heartbroken, hilarious, insane. Every greedy, unreasonable dream I'd ever have about a woman, or had about what a woman should be, came true in Mona. There, God loved her warm and creamy soul, was peace and plenty forever. There, God loved her warm and creamy soul, was peace and plenty forever. That girl, and she was only 18, was rapturously serene. And she was only 18, was rapturously serene. She seemed to understand all, and to be all there was to understand. In the books of Buchanan, she is mentioned by name. One thing Buchanan says of her is this: Mona has the simplicity of the all. Her dress was white and Greek. She wore flat sandals on her small brown feet. Her pale gold hair was lank and long. Her hips were a lyre. Oh God, when they say her hips were a lyre, it could be lyre, L-Y-R-E. Oh God, peace and plenty forever. She was the one beautiful girl in San Lorenzo. She was a national treasure. Papa had adopted her, according to Philip Castle, in order to mingle divinity with the harshness of his rule. The xylophone was rolled to the front of the stand and Mona played it. She played When Day Is Done. It was all tremolo. It was all tremolo, tremolo. swelling, fading, swelling again. The crowd was intoxicated by beauty, and then it was time for Papa to greet us. 65. A good time to come to San Lorenzo. Papa was a self-educated man who had been major domo to Corporal McCabe. He had never been off the island. He spoke American English passably well. He had been major domo to Corporal McCabe. He hadn't been off the island. He had never been off the island. Everything that any of us said on the reviewing stand was bellowed out at the crowd through doomsday horns. Whatever went out through those horns gabbled down a wide, short boulevard at the back of the crowd, ricocheted off the three glass-faced new buildings at the end of the boulevard, and came cackling back. Welcome, said Papa. You're coming to the best friend America ever had. America is misunderstood many places, but not here, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador. He bowed to H. Lowe Crosby, the bicycle manufacturer, mistaking him for the new ambassador. I know you got a good country here, Mr. President, said Crosby. Everything I ever heard about it sounds great to me. There's just one thing. Oh, I'm not the ambassador, said Crosby. I wish I was, but I'm just plain ordinary businessman. It hurt him to say who the real ambassador was. This man over here is the big cheese. Ah, Papa smiled at his mistake. The smile went away suddenly. Some pain inside of him made him wince. They made him hunch over, close his eyes, made him concentrate on surviving the pain. Frank Honecker went to the sport, feebly, incompetently. Are you all right? Excuse me, Papa, whispered at last, straightening up some. There were tears in his eyes. He brushed them away, straightening up all the way. I beg your pardon? He seemed to be in doubt for a moment as to where he was, as to what was expected of him. And then he remembered. He shook Horlick Minton's hand. Here, you are among friends. I'm sure of it, said Minton gently. Christian, said Papa. Good. Anti-communist, said Papa. Good. No communists here, said Papa. They fear the hook too much. I should think they would, said Minton. You have picked a very good time to come to us, said Papa. Tomorrow will be one of the happiest days in the history of our country. Tomorrow is our greatest national holiday, the day of the 100 martyrs to democracy. It will also be the day of the engagement of Major General Honecker to Mona Amons Manzano, to the most precious person in my life and in the life of San Lorenzo. I wish you much happiness, Miss Manzano, said Minton warmly, and I congratulate you, General Honecker. The two young people nodded their thanks. Minton now spoke of the so-called 100 martyrs to democracy, and he told a whooping lie. There is not an American schoolchild who does not know the story of San Lorenzo's noble sacrifice in World War II. The 100 brave San Lorenzans, whose day tomorrow is, gave as much as freedom-loving men can. The President of the United States has asked me to be his personal representative at ceremonies tomorrow, to cast the wreath, the gift of American people to the people of San Lorenzo on the sea. The people of San Lorenzo thank you and your President and the generous people of the United States of America for their thoughtfulness, said Papa. We would be honored if you would cast the wreath into the sea during the engagement party tomorrow. The honor is mine. Papa commanded us all to honor him with our presence at the wreath ceremony and engagement party next day. We would appear at his palace at noon. What children these two will have, Papa said, inviting us to stare at Frank and Mona. What blood, what beauty. The pain hit him again. He again closed his eyes to huddle himself around that pain. He waited for it to pass, but it did not pass. Still in agony, he turned away from us, faced the crowd and the microphone. He tried to gesture at the crowd, failed. He tried to say something to the crowd. He also failed. And then the words came out. Go home, he cried, strangling. Go home. The crowd scattered like leaves. Papa faced us again, still grotesque in pain. And then he collapsed. 66, the strongest thing there is. He wasn't dead, but he certainly looked dead, except that now and then, in the midst of all the seeming death, he would give a shivering twitch. Frank protested loudly that Papa wasn't dead, that he couldn't be dead. He was frantic. Papa, you can't die, you can't. Frank loosened Papa's collar and blouse, rubbed his wrists. Give him air, give Papa air. The fighter plane pilots came running over to help us. One had sense enough to go for the airport ambulance. The band and the color guard, which had received no orders, remained at quivering attention. I looked for Mona, found that she was still serene and had withdrawn to the rail of the reviewing stand. Death, if there was going to be a death, did not alarm her. Standing next to her was a pilot. He was not looking at her, but he had a perspiring radiance that attributed to his being so near to her. Not looking at her. Papa now regained something like consciousness, with a hand that flapped like a captured bird. He pointed at Frank. You, he said. We all fell silent in order to hear his words. His lips moved, but we could hear nothing but bubbling sounds. Somebody had what looked like a wonderful idea then, what looks like a hideous idea in retrospect. Someone, a pilot I think, took the microphone from its mouth and held it by Papa's bubbling lips in order to amplify its sounds. So death rattles and all sorts of spastic yodels bounced off the new buildings. And then came words. You, he said to Frank hoarsely, you, Franklin Honecker, you will be the next president of San Lorenzo. Science, you have science. Science is the strongest thing there is. Science, said Papa. Ice. He rolled his yellow eyes and he passed out again. I looked at Mona. Her expression was unchanged. The pilot next to her, however, had his features composed in the catatonic, orgiastic rigidity of one receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor. I looked down, I saw what I was not meant to see. Mona had slipped off her sandal, her small brown foot was bare, and with that foot she was kneading and kneading and kneading, obscenely kneading the instep of the flyer's boot. Oh, she's doing something. 67. I'm gonna read a couple more chapters. Papa didn't die, not then. Oh, I'm on chapter 67. Hayuka. Papa didn't die, not then. He was rolled away in the airport's big red meat wagon. The Mintons were taken to the embassy by an American limousine. Newt and Angela were taken to Frank's house in a San Lorenzo limousine. The Crosbys and I were taken to the Casa Mona Hotel, San Lorenzo's one taxi, a hearse-like 1939 Chrysler limousine with jump seats. The name on the side of the cab was Castle Transportation, Inc. The cab was owned by Philip Castle, the owner of Casa Mona, the son of the completely unselfish man I had come to interview. The Crosbys and I were both upset. Our consternation was expressed in questions we had to have answered at once. The Crosbys wanted to know who Bakunan was. They were scandalized by the idea that anyone should be opposed to Papa Manzano. Irrelevantly, I found that I had to know at once who the 100 martyrs to democracy had been. The Crosbys got their answer first. They could not understand the San Lorenzo dialect, so I had to translate for them. Crosby's basic question to our driver was, who the hell is this Passant Bakunan anyway? Very bad man, said the driver. What he actually said was Vari Balmon. Vari Balmon. A communist, asked Crosby when he heard my translation. Oh, sure. Has he got any following, sir? Does anybody think he's any good? Oh, no, sir, said the driver piously. Nobody that crazy. Why hasn't he been caught? Demanded Crosby. Hard man to find, said the driver, very smart. Well, people must be hiding him and giving him food or he'd be caught by now. Nobody hide him, nobody feed him. Everybody too smart to do that. You sure? Oh, sure, said the driver. Anybody free that crazy old man, anybody give him place to sleep, they get the hook. Nobody want the hook. He pronounced the last word, Hayuka. Alright, 68. Hunyera Moraturs. Hunyera Moraturs. I asked the driver who the 100 martyrs to democracy had been. The boulevard we were going down, I saw, was called the Boulevard of the 100 Martyrs to Democracy. The driver told me that San Lorenzo had declared war on Germany and Japan an hour after Pearl Harbor was attacked. San Lorenzo conscripted 100 men to fight on the side of democracy. These 100 men were put on a ship bound for the United States where they were to be armed and trained. The ship was sunk by a German submarine right outside of Bolivar Harbor. Doce Sore, he said. Yara lo hunyera morators to Samokratia. Yara lon hunyera morators to Zamorkratia. Those he'd say in dialect, are the 100 martyrs of democracy. Those, sir, he said in dialect, are the 100 martyrs of democracy. Those, sir, Yara lo hunyera. Those, sir. Yara lo hunyera morators to Democratia. Yeah, that means those, sir, are the 100 martyrs of democracy. Chapter 69. The Crosbys, a big mosaic. The Crosbys and I had the curious experience of being the very first guests of a new hotel. We were the first to sign the register of the Casa Mona. Crosby got to the desk ahead of me, but Ace Crosby was so startled by a holy blank register that he couldn't bring himself to sign. He had to think about it a while. "You sign," he said to me, and then, defying me to think he was superstitious, he declared his wish to photograph a man who was making a huge mosaic on the fresh plaster of the lobby wall. The mosaic was a portrait of Mona Amon's Manzano. It was 20 feet high. The man who was working on it was young and muscular. He sat at the top of a stepladder. He wore nothing but a pair of white duck trousers. He was a white man. The mosaicist, whatever, was making the fine hairs on the nape of Mona's swan neck out of chips of gold. Crosby went over to photograph him, came back to report that the man was the biggest passant he had ever met. Crosby was the color of tomato juice when he reported this. You can't say a damn thing to him that he won't turn inside out. So I went over to the mosaicist, watched him for a while, and then I told him, "I envy you." I always knew, he sighed, that if I waited long enough, somebody would come and envy me. I kept telling myself to be patient, that sooner or later somebody envious will come along. "Are you an American?" "The happiness is mine." He went right on working. He was curious as to what I looked like. "Do you want to take my photograph too? Do you mind?" "I think, therefore I am photographable." "I'm afraid I don't have my camera with me." "Well, for Christ's sake, get it. You're not one of those people who trust his memory, are you? I don't think I'll forget that face you're working on very soon. You'll forget it when you're dead, and so will I. When I'm dead, I'm going to forget everything. I advise you to do the same." "Has she been posing for this, or are you working from photographs, or what?" "I'm working from, or what?" "What? I'm working from, or what?" He tapped his temple. "It's all in this enviable head of mine. You know her? The happiness is mine. Frank Honeker's a lucky man. Frank Honeker is a piece of shit. You're certainly candid. I'm also rich. Glad to hear it. If you want an expert opinion, money doesn't necessarily make you happy. Thanks for the information. You just saved me a lot of trouble. I was just about to make some money." "How?" "Writing. I wrote a book once." "What was it called?" "San Lorenzo," he said. "The land, the history, the people." So that guy's somebody. The painter, that's just funny. About an artist. I knew if I did this long enough, people would come and envy me. So it just shows, like, I guess, the writers being funny and making fun of people who are artists, pretty much. It's not like you do something just to do it. You like the attention, I suppose. Anyway, y'all, peace. I think I got a text I gotta answer. Peace.